Hey folks, when leveling up your very first character in the War Within, you'll be forced to fully complete the leveling campaign, as all endgame content is locked behind it. While this isn't anything new, as Dragonflight and Shadowlands both had a similar system, there are a few quality of life changes introduced in the War Within's leveling that makes the campaign a lot less frustrating. In this video, I'll go over the fastest 70 to 80 leveling route for your very first character, with the goal being to reach level 80 in an efficient manner while fully completing the campaign. At the end of the video, I'll also briefly touch upon some changes you can make to the route while leveling up alts, as the campaign is no longer required from your second character onwards. After logging into the game with a level 70 character, you should receive a quest fittingly named The War Within, and it provides you with a teleportation scroll that goes directly into your bags. Using this scroll will teleport you to Silithus, and after progressing through this questline, you'll eventually reach the city of Dalaran. If you're watching this video before the expansion actually launches, you're already able to complete this section of the campaign, as it's available during the pre-patch. Right now, these quests will abruptly end in the basement of Dalaran, but when the expansion is fully released, you'll be able to pick up the next campaign quest from this point. The first of these new quests will be offered by Magni, and you'll receive 3 follow-ups that task you with completing various activities throughout the city of Dalaran. While these quests aren't terribly interesting on their own, if you're watching this video on launch, it's important to keep in mind that the Dalaran introduction will likely have a number of nasty bottlenecks. This means that optimizing the first few easy quests will be incredibly important, as falling behind here will lead to a snowball effect where you're endlessly fighting with other players over mob tags. If you want to avoid this, I'd highly recommend studying the first few minutes of my recent speedrun, as that way you can memorize the exact locations for every quest objective. Minor details like that generally won't be covered in this particular video, as I would rather discuss the broad strokes of the route. At the end of the Dalaran intro, which takes roughly 5 to 10 minutes, you'll be teleported to the continent of Kaz-Algar. Your character will initially be stuck under a pile of rocks, and you need to right-click them in order to free yourself. You can then speak to Jaina on the beach to receive the next few quests in the chain, and upon completing them a few minutes later, you'll unlock the ability to fly within Kaz-Algar. If you've been away from WoW for a while, it's important to note that flying in the game has changed rather drastically. A system called skywriting, formerly known as dragon riding, is now the default way to move around the world. Unfortunately, you won't be able to unlock the older version of flying until you complete some achievements at level 80, but thankfully skywriting is an incredibly fast method of transportation, and once you get the hang of it, you'll be zooming across the skies in no time. The next stretch of the campaign will lead you into Dornegal, which is the new major city introduced in the War Within. Down the line, this will be your primary hub for endgame content such as crafting and weekly quests, and during this part of the campaign, you'll briefly tour the city to learn where all of the important things are located. When a quest tells you to speak with the Dornegal innkeeper, you should set your Hearthstone to this location, as it'll be useful as a teleport later on. The rest of these quests are fairly straightforward, but I will point out that Blizzard has introduced the ability to skip roleplay dialogue on many quests within the campaign. It should go without saying that this is a faster way to complete the quest, but obviously there's nothing wrong with losing a bit of time to enjoy the story. Shortly after arriving in a town called Freywald Village, you'll be tasked with completing a delve, which is a new form of content introduced in the War Within. Without going into too much detail, delves are basically solo dungeons that you can complete alongside an NPC companion. If you've played past World of Warcraft expansions, this is effectively the new version of Torghast, Island Expeditions, Mop Scenarios, etc. The endgame version of delves are designed to be a bit more open-ended, but during the campaign quest it's fairly linear and will work the same for every single player. It's basically just a little tutorial for the new expansion feature buried inside of the campaign questline, but it's the only time during the campaign that you'll be forced to complete a delve. However, this isn't the only time during the campaign where Blizzard tried to teach you about a new feature, as only about 15 minutes later you're directed to complete a follower dungeon, which was a system introduced towards the end of the previous expansion. While delves are special content designed specifically to be done solo, dungeons are still being created with a 5-player group in mind. Blizzard wanted to give new players a way to experience these dungeons without feeling forced to interact with other players, so they created the follower dungeon system. This allows you to complete every single normal War Within dungeon with a team of NPC companions, and they'll adjust their roles depending on what class and specialization you're playing. Just like before, this part of the campaign mostly serves as a tutorial to introduce follower dungeons to new players, but you are forced to fully complete it if you want to move on to the next quest. Before I continue discussing the campaign itself, I want to take a moment to talk about side quests. If you completely ignore every single side quest and only progress the campaign, you'll only manage to reach roughly level 76.5. This is still a good distance away from level 80, so obviously you'll need to get additional experience from another source. There are a few advanced methods, such as experience from crafting or grinding elite mobs out in the open world, but these strategies aren't approachable for new players, so I won't be covering them in this particular guide. Also, while dungeon spamming has historically been a decent leveling method, the random dungeon finder has been broken for the entirety of the War Within's beta, which means I've been completely unable to test dungeon leveling. Even if it worked properly when the expansion launches, I don't expect it'll be faster than questing for a variety of complicated reasons, but I won't bore you with the details. Finally, while delves can technically be used for leveling, the current experience values are horribly undertuned, so I can't honestly recommend them. This leaves side quests as the only reliable way to earn the rest of your experience, and thankfully, there are many good side quest hubs throughout all 4 zones in Khazal-Gar. In fact, I think it's fair to say that the first zone, Isle of Dorn, has some of the best questlines in the entire expansion. You may find it strange then that I haven't recommended doing any of them thus far in the guide, and I've only told you to follow the campaign. This is not a mistake, as there are 2 key reasons why I do not recommend doing Isle of Dorn side quests early on in the leveling process. The first and most important reason only matters during the expansion's launch, and it's pretty simple. The Isle of Dorn will be swarmed with players only minutes after the expansion goes live, and this will make it incredibly difficult to efficiently complete any quests. Because of this, your best bet will be to rush through Isle of Dorn as quickly as you can and get to the second zone, as you'll face far less competition from that point onwards. I know some people may think I'm over-exaggerating here, but if you played through the mob back when Shadowlands launched, you should hopefully understand that I am completely serious. The first zone of any expansion is always a complete clusterfuck. No matter how efficient it may appear in a vacuum, it will not be worth completing on launch day. It should go without saying that this won't matter for players leveling well after launch, but there is still one other key reason for skipping Isle of Dorn quests. Back in Dragonflight, you were required to finish the entire campaign and reach level 70 before you were able to unlock Adventure Mode. In case you aren't familiar with this, Adventure Mode is a system for leveling your second character onwards, which gives you a lot more freedom in terms of how you approach the leveling process. For starters, the campaign is no longer mandatory, as all endgame content is unlocked for your alts the moment you complete it with a single character. Additionally, Adventure Mode causes all of the zones to scale to your level, meaning that you can start all the way at the end of the campaign and work your way backwards, if that's something that you really wanted to do. As you might imagine, this also makes leveling considerably faster, since you could skip any campaign quests that would normally be really slow and do a handful of efficient side quests instead. As previously mentioned, Adventure Mode in the War Within will still require you to fully complete the leveling campaign. However, in this expansion, that is literally the only requirement. You no longer need to reach max level in addition to completing the campaign. Adventure Mode will automatically open up for your first character even if you are not yet level 80. The even crazier part of this is that Adventure Mode versions of open world zones are in a completely separate phase from everyone leveling their very first character. By completing the leveling campaign and unlocking Adventure Mode early, you're actually able to return to Isle of Dorn on your first character and complete the quest scaled up to your level completely devoid of any competition. I've tested multiple variations of campaign leveling on the War Within beta, and this strategy has felt like the best one by far, so it'll be the basis for the rest of my guide. For now, we're going to continue discussing the campaign, and you'll want to avoid doing any Isle of Dorn side quests, but just remember, we'll be returning to this zone at the end of the video. At the place that we left off, you would have just finished the mandatory follower dungeon, and the campaign will soon send you off to the far end of the isle to defend the Cinderbrew Meadery. After finishing these quests, you'll be told to return to Dornegal, and this is where you should use your Hearthstone. This marks the end of the Isle of Dorn campaign, and the next set of quests will have you fly down a gigantic tunnel and enter the second zone, Ringing Deeps. The initial quests in this zone aren't very notable, and before long, you'll find yourself entering the main quest hub for the Ringing Deeps, which is called Gundergaz. Just as in Dornegal, you should locate the innkeeper in Gundergaz and set your Hearthstone here, as there's multiple points later in the campaign where you'll want to use it. As you complete the initial quests in this town, there are 2 side quests that you'll want to pick up: On Cold Dark Wings and Discarded and Broken. Generally speaking, the philosophy I outlined before about ignoring side quests early on will still apply in the Ringing Deeps. While you will have already made it out of the initial zone by this point, it's now critical that you begin cementing your lead ahead of the pack instead of giving other players the opportunity to catch up. If Ringing Deeps had side quests on the level of Isle of Dorn, it may have been worth adding more detours just to get efficient experience, but this is not the case. As a result, I'm only going to recommend very specific quests that happen to directly overlap with the campaign. In the case of these 2 from Gundergaz, they're both located directly next to the town and take very little time to complete. Discarded and Broken also has a few follow-up quests which overlap perfectly with later sections of the campaign, so it effectively ends up being free experience. The next chunk of campaign quests in this zone are pretty self-explanatory, but it is worth mentioning that many of them take you deep inside of caves, which limits your ability to use mounts or mobility items such as gun shoes. Quests like these are why I highly recommended obtaining a speed set during my recent video discussing leveling preparation for the War Within. If you haven't watched that video yet, I'll include a link to it in the description below. Around this point, you'll also encounter a scenario which tasks you with sneaking around groups of kobolds and putting out candles. The intended way to complete this scenario is by avoiding combat, but it's also just as effective to completely ignore the stealth mechanics and AoE down all of the kobolds. The moment you finish the scenario, the game will tell you to return to Gundergaz, and this is a good spot to use your Hearthstone. From here, you'll be directed towards the bottom of the zone, and after completing all of the quests with Magni and Dagran, you'll once again be told to return to Gundergaz. If you manage to complete this questline extremely quickly, your Hearthstone may still be on cooldown, but you can feel free to use it here if it happens to be back up. The final set of quests within the Ringing Deeps takes place in a subzone called the Earthenworks, and a lot of these can be pretty frustrating. During the quest Battle of the Earthenworks, you need to complete various objectives to fill up a bar, and the fastest way to do this is by clicking on friendly earthen NPCs standing nearby. Each NPC you click on rewards a large chunk of percentage for the quest, and you're able to interact with them while mounted, making the process super easy. Additionally, there's a treasure located just to the left of this quest area called Discarded Tools, and you can quickly interact with it for a free 5,000 experience. The very last quest in this zone takes you into yet another scenario, and it's pretty lengthy as you need to wait on Dagran to slowly cut open multiple doorways. When you reach the room with turrets, you can aim your bombs in a precise location to blow up multiple turrets with a single throw. Later on, you'll reach a gigantic room where you need to defend Dagran as he plays around with a console, but the description of this part of the quest is a bit misleading. It's presented as a time-based quest where you fight off waves of enemies, but it begins to speed up as you kill additional mobs. It's actually faster to completely ignore Dagran and run around the room killing anything you find, as eventually the stage will be marked as complete and Dagran will move on to the next doorway. After you finish this scenario and listen to a bit of roleplay, you'll have technically completed the Ringing Deeps. However, there are a few final side quests that you'll want to finish up before you can move on to the third zone, Hollowfall. First, the follow-up quests from Discarded and Broken can be easily completed during the roleplay within Gundergaz. Both quests take place in and around the town, so you can finish them while Moira is busy giving her speech. Additionally, just outside the entrance to Hollowfall, you'll encounter 3 more side quests that are worth doing. The first one is Cinderbrew Reserve, and while this normally requires you to escort a keg of beer through an annoying stealth mission, certain classes such as monks can completely bypass it with a creative use of their abilities. With a well-placed Transcendence, I can teleport directly up a cliff and easily drop off the keg of beer at its destination. If you don't have abilities that can trivialize this quest, I would recommend skipping it, as the intended method makes it really inefficient. Nearby, you'll find 3 more side quests, an Igneous End, Mag Management, and Sampling Steam. The Steam quest takes forever to finish, so you shouldn't bother completing it. However, the 2 quests to kill elementals and rescue miners are both incredibly fast, so it's worth knocking those 2 out before heading into Hollowfall. The third zone is a bit interesting, because on one hand, the campaign is extremely straightforward and I don't have much to say about it. However, this zone is also where you're going to get the vast majority of your side quest XP, so there's a lot to discuss on that front. Not only is Hollowfall far enough into the campaign that I would consider it safe to do as many side quests as you want, but there are a ton of efficient side quests in this zone. To make things easy, I'm going to go through the entire list of initial side quests that you'll complete within Hollowfall. Unless I state otherwise, you should assume that the entire quest chain associated with that side quest is worth completing, and if I don't mention a quest at all, it's probably bad and should be skipped. After entering the first town in Hollowfall, Danel's Kindness, you should grab the quests called For Morale and Suspicious Minds. However, you shouldn't complete these quests immediately, as they'll overlap with another set of side quests that you'll receive much later into the zone. Roughly 15 to 20 minutes later, you should be reaching a town called Laurel's Crossing, and as you pass through here, you'll grab a quest called Lights Out. This will unlock a side quest hub that you'll want to complete later on, but again, you shouldn't go there right away. Shortly afterwards, you'll reach a point in the campaign where you need to kill a bunch of fish monsters. For reference, these campaign quests are called Tricks of the Dark and Fickle Fiendish Fish. While finishing these quests, you should look out for a stealth mob called a Kobish Shadeshaper, as killing it drops an item that starts a quest. You should complete the side quest alongside the campaign, as there's also a nearby bonus objective called Release the Beasts, which you can easily complete for a whopping 30,000 experience. Upon finishing these campaign quests, you shouldn't rush to hand them in just yet. You'll first want to finish up the side quests given to you by the Talking Fish, and then you'll fly to the islands in the northwest and turn in the aforementioned quest Lights Out. This leads to the side quest hub called Velhan's Claim, and I'd recommend doing all of the quests here as they're very efficient. Once you've completed everything, you can fly back to the shoreline and hand in your campaign quests from earlier. You'll continue along the Hollowfell campaign for quite a while without encountering any side quests until you reach the major city of Merildar. Shortly after entering the city, you should set your Hearthstone at the local inn, since, as you may already expect, it'll save you a bit of time later on. As you complete quests within the town, you should begin to pick up every single side quest that you come across, as most of them will be worth completing. The only two side quests that I don't recommend doing are called The Last Mage and Fishing is Good for the Soul. As for other quests, you should immediately finish anything that is located within the city of Merildar, but a handful of chains will direct you towards a different section of Hollowfell, and you'll want to finish those after you've progressed a bit further in the campaign. Upon completing every single campaign quest in the Veneration Grounds, you'll receive a follow-up quest called the Final Front, which will direct you into the final zone of Khazalgar, Azj-Kahet. However, you're not quite ready to enter that zone just yet, as this is when you'll want to finish every single remaining side quest. You'll kick things off with the Brothers Braunpike, as this chain starts close by. Eventually, you'll receive a quest called Go to the Priory, but things become extremely inefficient from that point on. At this stage, you should fly east and complete the quests that start with an Orphan's Request. Once you finish this chain, you can fly a bit further to the east and complete 5 different side quests that are all very close together. Regular Fiber, Does Anyone Like Wasps, a baddie request, and the 2 that you picked up shortly after entering Hollowfell, For Morale and Suspicious Minds. All of these quests will be turned in close to the entrance of Hollowfell, so you should use your Hearthstone and return to Merildar once you're finished. From here, you can hand in the quest A Final Goodbye, and then continue the campaign into Azj-Kahet. At this point in time, you should hopefully be close to hitting level 77. Most of the mobs in early Azj-Kahet are level 78 to 79, so ideally you don't want to reach this zone too early, since the mobs may give you a bit of trouble. This is one of the main reasons that I still recommend doing so many side quests in Hollowfell, even though you could technically rush the campaign and unlock Adventure Mode. At a certain point, it becomes inefficient to just bum rush the campaign, especially as you get closer to the end. Around this time, you'll begin the worst quest in the entire War Within campaign, where you have to shoot down Nerubians while riding a giant Zeppelin. Although this quest is conceptually very cool, for whatever reason, Blizzard decided to give the Zeppelin the most cursed controls of all time, and they heavily restrict your camera movement, making it extremely difficult to aim your shots properly. Once you've unlocked all 3 abilities on the Zeppelin, I would actually recommend exiting the vehicle and quickly re-entering it. This will place you back at the start of the quest, but all mobs will respawn and you'll still have all of the Zeppelin powers unlocked, allowing you to quickly blast a bunch of Nerubians and complete the quest a bit earlier than intended. Upon fully entering Azj-Kahet, you'll immediately want to grab a nearby side quest called the Second Front. Completing this quest alongside the nearby campaign is extremely easy, and it offers 2 follow-ups that are also both incredibly quick. However, from this point, I have very little to say about Azj-Kahet as a zone. There are some alright side quests in this area, but you're already super close to unlocking Adventure Mode, and Isle Dorn is just better. It's possible that a few side quest chains within Azj-Kahet will make their way into my optimized alt leveling route that I'll be working on post-launch, but during the first character leveling process, it's hard to justify doing anything extra in this zone. In addition to this, the campaign within Azj-Kahet is notably shorter than every other zone, and most of the quests are pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I'll touch on is the scenario at the very end of the campaign called Escape the Burrows. While nothing in this scenario should be noteworthy, it is incredibly buggy on the beta, and I have consistently lost time to softflex here during my recent test runs. It's possible that this will all be fixed before launch, but if not, you may need to repeat the scenario a few different times until it properly finishes. Following this scenario, you only need to complete a few roleplay-filled quests before you're done with the entire leveling campaign. The final quest of the campaign is actually handed in all the way back in Dornegal, but worry not, because a nearby teleporter in Azj-Kahet will open up to take you there. As previously mentioned, completing this quest will unlock Adventure Mode for your entire account, and this includes the character that you're currently leveling. You can then freely roam around an empty version of the Isle of Dorn and complete any side quest that you come across. Now, around this point in my test run, I was just past level 78, but your exact numbers may vary, since my recent test run was completed with War Mode on. This isn't a major concern though, since I managed to hit level 80 without even touching roughly 1/3 of the available quests in Isle of Dorn. Honestly, you can really do whatever you want within the zone, and it'll end up being efficient. Most of the side quests here are super good. That being said, I will give you a few quick pointers on which side quests you should prioritize doing first, as some are obviously better than others. For starters, there is a wanted poster in the subzone Crossroad Plaza, which will give you 2 super fast wanted quests. One of them is very close to the plaza and should be completed immediately, while the other quest, the Burrow Breaker, should be completed whenever you stop by its associated side quest hub. In addition to these wanted quests, you should make sure to stop by Morning Rise, the Kobold quest hub a bit to the north of Crossroad Plaza, and Rambleshire, which is located all the way at the top of Isle of Dorn. These two hubs are without a doubt the most efficient sets of quests within the zone, but again, literally every single other side quest hub is worth completing. After you finish Rambleshire and Morning Rise, just sweep around the Isle of Dorn and complete random quests until you hit level 80. While that covers the entire campaign leveling route, I want to end the video by giving a few quick pointers for alt leveling with your second character onwards. Something that I didn't mention at the start of the video is that every character you level in the War Within will grant you a stacking 5% experience bonus for all future characters, and this caps out at 25% after you've leveled 5 characters up to 80. This obviously means that the more characters you level up, the faster the entire process will become, and you'll be able to slowly trim out the less efficient quests with each additional character. Within the next few weeks, I'll be posting a detailed alt leveling guide, but because of how this achievement works, it's going to be difficult to create a one-size-fits-all route for every single player. That being said, the best way to go about leveling alts will always be to prioritize the efficient side quests first, such as all of the ones in Isle of Dorn. Additionally, it's safe to say that every single side quest that I included in the campaign leveling route, such as the ones in Hollowfall, are worth completing. The main difference between alt leveling and campaign leveling will boil down to your ability to skip the really annoying quests that take forever and offer very little experience to compensate. For instance, the actual campaign quests within the Isle of Dorn are objectively terrible, especially the tutorials for delves and follower dungeons. While the overall campaigns for the other 3 zones aren't quite as bad, you likely won't do many of their quests while leveling alts due to the extensive roleplay sections. Once again, this is a topic that I'll be covering in more detail in a future video, but I did want to at least touch upon it here so you know what to expect when leveling your alt characters during the War Within's launch. If you found this video helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you could toss it a like, as that'll help other people find it as well. Also, if you want to see more guides like this the moment they're posted, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.